Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. This podcast is sponsored by Unlock Stories. I wrote a chapter for this book. My chapter is about an app that allows people to send text messages with the dead. I had a lot of fun creating an obscure science fiction convention for a significant part of the story. And each chapter talks about different apps that people interact with, and the characters go on different adventures. The book is available on Apple Books, Amazon, and Kindle, and highly recommend you check it out if you enjoy my blogging on the Legal Geeks. And with me is Gabby Martin, and we're going to nerd out about Crisis on an Infinite Earths. We'll dip into the comic. We'll talk about what the CW has done with their mega crossover that has been years in the making. I mean, technically, since The Flash began, we've been teasing Crisis, and here we are. So we're going to talk about it. Gabby, how are you?
I am good. The Smallville cameo was everything I needed, and it put such a wonderful close on that, and just it was such a good transition. I mean, Smallville walked so that the Arrowverse could run, and it really showed that. So I'm very glad that we got that.
Well, let's talk about some big issues, and then let's get into Crisis. So, you grew up as a DC fan. Who's your favorite DC character?
Honestly, I am a huge Lois Lane fan. I grew up wanting to be Lois Lane. I thought Lois Lane was the coolest, not 1978 Lois Lane, who was kind of ditzy, but hard-hitting journalist Lois Lane. That was my dream job, was to work at the Daily Planet. So that, yeah. And obviously Superman and all of that, but Lois Lane is the unsung hero, I think, of the Superman universe.
Yeah, and there are different interpretations of her. And now, granted, I was 4 when the 1978 Superman came out, so I remember seeing that. I remember being very excited for Superman 2 as a child, and yeah, I do love that version because and love Christopher Reeve's Superman just because childhood connection, and it arguably was the first successful comic book movie in the modern era, and we wouldn't be here today without Superman 1978. So
Yeah.
I do have a strong feeling.
Yeah. No,
Now,
I love Margaret Kidder, and she's great, but um yeah, there's a lot about Lois Lane in the 1978 version, and Superman, more Superman 2, the theatrical cut as opposed to the Richard Donner cut, but yeah, there's just a lot that they do with her, then especially her dialogue is just questionable at times for somebody who's supposed to be an award-winning journalist. It's very, very concerning, but it's a product of its time. So yeah, it's been interesting to see the evolution of Lois, and Lois in the animated series and all of that kind of stuff. That was Lois in the animated series was my first introduction to that character, and then getting to see the 78 cut, and then Smallville, obviously, and going back through her journey and evolution. So what about you? What's your favorite DC character?
well, I tend to side with Green Lantern, and sure, it was a horrible movie that did need a rewrite that could have saved it. But I do like the core. I've always enjoyed Hal Jordan because of the fighter pilot. I learned to fly before I could drive, so again, there's like that. I also always enjoyed the space characters, but I do have a strong affinity for Superman and the Flash, and we'll talk about that as we get into Crisis and
Mm-hmm.
how the different versions of those characters appear in both the TV shows and the comics because they are iconic. DC does have some very long lasting iconic characters. and we'll talk about how they honor them. So,
and I think what Crisis does very, very well, that we really haven't seen in any sort of other form, is really, you know, beat after beat. It's really acknowledging where this comic book history has come from, and comic book history on film and on television, where it's come from. I mean, the amount of cameos that you have, it's very respectful and it's very deferential, I think. And it was very amazing to see, you know, all of these kinds of bits and pieces of the DC universe adaptations from across the years. I mean, even from the Adam West Batman, you know, that you had all of that kind of packed into one TV series was super cool.
Part of me really hoped for a George Reeve cameo somehow of like archival footage of black and white, because that would have just been like the chef kiss of pure gold, of like, well done. But who knows? We got 2 episodes left. Maybe they'll pull off that hat trick, because I give them a lot of credit for.
I mean, they pulled the Lucifer crossover out of, like, nobody saw that one coming. So you know, we got 2 episodes. Who knows who we'll see. And Titans, we got a Titans crossover. So, you know, anything is possible.
Well, that in Batman '89. So and again, one of the things that they're doing very well is the different musical homages. You know, whether it's, you know, the classic Batman. '89 movie music, or, you know, the John Williams Superman themes when we see you know, Superman '96, which is really Superman '78. But so just seeing that, it's like they know how to pull on our heartstrings. And even with homages to the 1990 Flash TV show, which I fondly remember watching, going like, wow, they pulled it off. Now, we can talk about why the show wasn't successful because of the original comic book Crisis. Because they made a TV show about a dead character. And so there's no ongoing comic that has Barry Allen alive, because at that point in time, the comic was with Wally West as the Flash. And so again, we have all of those weird issues, but that, I think that did a number on the show. Plus, it was probably super expensive to make at the time. But this is just a magnificent love letter to every DC fan and every DC TV show that they've been able to do, maybe with the exception of the Wonder Woman show, but maybe we'll see something.
That, like, I mean, Linda Carter has come on Supergirl, so I'm not putting anything past them. I mean, you know, Smallville did that a lot, but in small, you know, doses. You obviously had Christopher Reeve guest star, you had Margaret Kidder, you had Linda Carter, but this is really, like you said, it's a love letter to all the visual adaptations of the comics. And I think I can't wait to see who we get, and maybe that's how they hook people in with this almost month gap that we had between the episodes. So they're like, get on board for the, you know, the even bigger and better cameos that are going to come in the last 2 episodes. So
we'll see, and that can tie into our comic discussion on how they are pulling in what happened in the comic. Because to be fair, the Crisis comic book, you know, came out in 1985. It was part of the 50th anniversary for DC. And because of DC's writing style, everything was just fragmented. So this, you know, it's like, we'll just call it the multiverse. and that explains how we have things all over the place. And so they, for their 50th, they went like, okay, let's clean this up, because this is a mess. And they made the right call. And Marv Wolfman, who's going to be at San Diego Comic Fest, and I will bring something for him to autograph, and I can't wait to hear him speak, did a brilliant job with the comic, with the scope of it. They had the full DC roster of 50 years worth of characters that they could pull from. So there are elements of this story that like they just can't do on TV because those characters weren't introduced. And the biggest is the Green Lantern Corps. You know, the multiverse existed in the DC comics because of Oa, which is the planet where the Green Lantern Corps is based. And again, short version of the history, the multiverse was created by a scientist on Oa named Corona, who did this experiment looking back into time for the creation element and seeing this giant hand. And that experiment ended up causing this big explosion, which thus made the multiverse. So it went from one universe to a multiple universes. Oa did not have a sister planet in any of the parallel Earths or parallel universes, pardon me. But they did have the sister planet in the antimatter universe, which was Q-Ward. And that's where the Anti-Monitor is based. None of that's happening in this TV series because one, we don't have the Green Lantern half of this. Flash has teased it. You know, they tease going to Ferris aircraft and like using a Ferris hangar and making reference of one of their test pilots disappearing. So like that was a total Green Lantern reference. It's like I appreciate that. But
and wasn't in the last crossover, Earth 90s, Flash made reference to John Diggle looking like Jon Stewart?
Yes.
And so that was another, that they I feel like they're dancing around it, and they're never gonna pull the trigger and give us, I mean, you know, the full Green Lantern Corps. They're just dropping little hints here and there.
Yeah, and again, like the idea with, you know, Jon Stewart versus John Dingle, it's like they could play with like he took a stepfather name or something along those lines, that there was a Stewart in his family, but for some reason he didn't get the last name Stewart, because there is the reference about you don't have your ring, which is like, again, every fanboy and fangirl are, you know, flailing realizing the reference because he is such an important character. And but they do that. So again, sweet love letter, you know, it's like getting a Valentine weekly from these guys. And like I appreciate what they're doing here. Well, let's talk about some of the legal issues, so we're not just, you know, glowing about nerddom. But this series kicks off with Supergirl and the antimatter wave going to Earth 38, and they evacuate probably a little bit more than half of Earth 38, and so that's 3 billion people. Well, okay, if their population is 6 billion, okay, it's half. If it's 7 billion, it's less than half, and they end up on Earth 1. So a couple of things with that. You could literally have doppelgangers arriving as refugees.
Yeah.
And that gets super weird fast. So let's talk, and plus, Earth 1 doesn't have an alien population hanging out like the way Earth 38 turned into a haven for immigrants from other planets coming in, and nativist senators wanting to build a dome over the country. You know, not political at all.
Not relevant.
Nope, that crazy talk. Pure sci-fi.
Stop saying that Superman / Supergirl is not relevant in 2020. Please stop saying that.
Yes, Siegel and Schuster are both spitting in their graves.
Yes,
but,
yes, they are.
Oh, come on. But we have 3 billion people, humans and aliens, multiple aliens, as in different species, arriving on Earth and going like, hi, we need a place to stay. So taking the population of Earth 1, which could be about 7 billion to 10 billion, and you could have repeat people of like or you might have people who are dead in one place but alive in the other now. So that gets very weird very quickly. Well, let's get into the issue of how could people from Earth 38 seek asylum on Earth 1? Do you want to take the first stab at this?
Yeah, so basically when you were talking about all these ships from Earth 38 arriving on Earth 1, would you tend to call that a caravan of us people seeking asylum from Earth 38? No, so they do show up, and clearly the biggest thing that you need when seeking asylum, and this is, you know, any immigration attorney worth their salt will tell you this is the biggest hurdle to get over, is the well-founded fear of persecution. And it's so difficult. It's literally one of the highest legal bars you can clear, because you really need to document that the persecution is against you specifically, not just, you can't say, oh, well, like the conditions in my country are bad. Like, you have to prove that if you went back, you would be executed on site, that you would die. Like, this is, that you have to demonstrate the truly life or death situation that you are in order to be granted asylum. And I think, you know, with the antimatter wave destroying whole planets, what these asylees are basically going to say is, I don't have an Earth to return to, right? I have nowhere to return to. My entire population, my entire Earth was wiped out by a planetary genocide, and that's why I'm seeking asylum. And you tend to see, in cases of genocide, that's where it gets a little easier to clear the well-founded persecution hurdle, because, you know, like the Rwandan genocide and things like that, and what's happening in the Congo, that it's easier to prove that people are dying en masse by execution, and, you know, very regimented kind of execution, as opposed to just dangerous conditions. So I think hopefully they would be granted asylum. I mean, you do obviously now have the issue of doppelgangers and people looking like other people, and, you know, so-and-so seeing their dead husband or whatever suddenly pop back up. But my thinking is that if Harrison Wells can hop onto Barry Allen's Earth in whatever multiple forms he takes, you know, now he's in as pariah. You know, we've seen him as HR, we've seen him as all these kinds of things, the reverse flash. So I think if he can, you know, hop in and out as a doppelganger without having any issues, I think these people are pretty okay, because nobody's ever said, like, oh, this guy is like this dead Harrison Wells. Like, nobody's ever questioned that in the Flash, and whether that's, you know, a very giant gaping plot hole, or just the people of Central City are, you know, not very aware of things. But hopefully that kind of mentality would carry over to Earth 1.
Yeah, let's talk about that in just a second. So there's the other part of this that, you know, you have the unforeseen emergency. Earth 38 is gone. I'm like, it's gone, void, not there anymore. So that does qualify as a reason to grant asylum. Where it gets weird is, you know, like if you have whoever's now the president of the United States going like, hey, we're here, and this looks exactly like our country, but different, but the same. And, you know, like that also gets weird. You also get into the issue of, like, DC created fake cities. And you kind of wonder, like, so where are those supposed to be? So, like, it's like, you know, Metropolis looks like New York, you know, and Gotham kind of like Chicago, or is it Philadelphia? So, like, you have those.
Gotham was New York, and that Metropolis was like Topeka. Indianapolis.
It could be. Again, it depends like what version you're looking at. Because I mean, Gotham being in New York in the 1970s, yeah, it absolutely, or the Dinkin era in New York when it was like really scary, absolutely. So there's always that half of it, but you then get people showing up, and it's like, does their ATM cards work? Like, are the because that raises identity theft and like in false impersonation pretty significantly, and there is a difference between the two of those, whether or not you're impersonating someone or you're using their information. And like if you were accessing your doppelganger's bank account, well, it's like we now have a new level of crime taking place, or if they, because it's not like they showed up with gold bullion, from Earth 38 in order to land. Then there's the issue of like, just where do you put everyone?
Yeah.
It's like you can't just go terraform desert. And it's like, well, because the United States does have a lot of empty space, like places that just aren't habitable. Could they make parts habitable? And like okay, we'll call this place Metropolis or whatever, that let's go terraform parts of rural Nevada that's just empty desert, or Arizona, or I don't know, chunks of Utah, and go like, okay, we're gonna make this nice big resort in Wyoming that was inaccessible and unlivable, but here we are. So again, interesting questions there. But
I think another thing that may come into play, because we see this kind of exodus or evacuation taking place, that's quite frantic, and it's kind of unclear how long this evacuation seems to take, because we only see the one that's happening in National City, but there's theoretically, hopefully, and I think they do mention it, that it's happening across the world, because obviously it's the entire Earth that's being destroyed. So my concern is, and this would be a concern for an immigration lawyer, that if that was the first place they went to when they arrived in Earth 1, is because there's a difference of arriving in a country with papers and without papers. And so if you enter with papers, or via some traditional route, you entered with inspection. So this opens an entirely different avenue of possibilities to you than if you entered without inspection, or iwi. If you enter iwi, you enter either without papers or without inspection. You don't enter a traditional route, which technically, we can imagine that these ships aren't kind of landing, in a traditional port and, going through the process. Did they bring their interplanetary visa / IDs / all of that kind of identification? Because that's another thing that immigrants face, is that when you're coming up, kind of through the Central American countries, your papers tend to get stolen from you. And so it's a matter of proving your identity. And if you don't have documents, you can't enter without inspection. And a lot of traditional routes are specifically closed to you because you didn't have that initial inspection, so by a customs officer. So that would be another thing to consider, is how are they landing on Earth 1? And I do believe Earth 1 ultimately gets destroyed at the end of the 3-part series, because I think all we're left with at the cliffhanger is the 7 paragons. So it may be kind of a moot point to begin with.
Well, maybe it depends how much of the comic they're following, and we'll talk about that in a second. Oh God, so much to unpack there. So Luthor, sister, after the weird exchange with, again, like the dramatic exchange with, oh, you didn't trust me, all that, we'll just call it CW drama that's there for the sake of drama. The portal that they had that they used for like the Daxamite evacuation or incident looked like out in the desert someplace. So I don't know if that's someplace in California, since National City is kind of like LA. So inland California, middle of the desert. Well, if they pop out on Earth 1 outside of LA, hopefully there was a little alarm beforehand so no one would freak out, because, well, Earth 1 did, they did put the invasion storyline in Earth 1. And so, and the president was killed by aliens. So I don't know if they covered up an alien invasion and with how the president got blowed up, but, like you tend to, you're not going to miss that unless they decide we're going to cover up the existence of alien life. And we'll figure out some other way to say, like, oh, the president had a heart attack. He didn't get vaporized.
He had a fiery heart attack.
Yeah, big fiery heart attack. It was a blender accident. Yeah, it's
what
like,
is that? Spontaneous combustion, which
like,
I thought was going to be much more of an issue in my adult life than it ended up being.
Yeah, it's like, how do you explain that to the American people? So these superheroes screwed up. The president got kidnapped and then killed. And now we have our first female president. Yay!
Yay!
At least Barry Allen made the comment about normally the president calling would be cool, but and just looked down sad. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so they're at least bummed out, but still, so at least this world knows of aliens, because an alien or refugee caravan showing up outside of LA full of doppelgangers and aliens would freak people out if there's never been first contact, let alone the doppelganger issue of like, oh, there's now two of me. Or how'd you end up taller and cooler? Like crap like that could happen with, oh, you were successful? Oh wow.
Now you're like dead and we haven't seen you in 5.5 years.
Yeah. All of that can get super weird and complicated. And it's like responding legally, like trying to use the current system that we have, it's not designed for it. So, because again, we're not used to exact doppelgangers showing up that are the same down to the cellular level. That doesn't happen. Like we don't have magic twins. So lots of weird issues that could come up. And we'll talk about, I do think Earth 1 is okay, but we'll get into that. Because that would mean all of the universes were destroyed and there's nothing left in the antimatter one. So, but that's a comic. Let's talk about the beginning of this story, where we have Harbinger. Recruiting is the generous term, heroes to help. Some might call it kidnapping. And why don't you address this? Is it aggressive recruiting or is it kidnapping?
I think it's. I mean, the thing you would have to look at is who goes with her willingly. So, we see her journey start with a recap of the scene from the last Arrow episode where Oliver and Mia are talking on Lian Yu and she appears and they kind of seem to go willingly. I don't know how willingly Oliver would have allowed Mia to go because he seemed very insistent that she wasn't part of any sort of crisis. So that may have a bit of taking against the will. And then we see her come to Barry Allen. Barry obviously is like, okay, it's time, let's go. You know, he's clearly recruited. Like he knows this is happening. You know, he just jumps on board. And then I believe that the next one you see is, um, um, shoot, Kate Kane. And she seems to be kidnapped because, I mean, she could handle herself, but before she gets to kind of make any sort of objection, Harbinger is just like, nope, we're leaving, we're out of here. So she is kind of restrained, at least initially, against her will, and she's taken to Earth 38 against her will. And then we see Harbinger come upon the legends, and that one, it doesn't, we don't see how much of an objection there is there. All we see is the kind of the quippy, you know, oh, Lila, what's with the costume, you know, and then they obviously go to Earth 38. And so the one that we don't see kind of taken is Superman, is Clark and Lois. But obviously they were escaping death. So, you know, I don't think they would object much to somebody saying, okay, like you can either die here or you can come with me and live. You know, I don't think that's, so I think really the one person that would truly, I think, be kidnapped would be, under the common law definition, would be Kate. I mean, she's really taken there. She objects the minute they arrive there that, you know, she was in the middle of an interrogation and she didn't want to be there. So, and she's taken, it's funny because they're not just taken somewhere else, like to a different location. They're taken to a whole other Earth. So, you know, they're forcibly removed from their Earth to another Earth. But yeah, Kate is definitely kidnapped there.
Yeah, it's that's a rough day for her, and yeah, I do adore the actress. I like seeing her without the mask, so we can actually see her emote. So I'm glad that they have her take off the cowl and wig, so we can actually, you know, like get eye contact and her cool haircut.
Yeah.
But
It cracks me up though, because she goes in and out of her accent throughout the episodes, and it's so distracting. So I'm like, wait, Kate Kane is not Australian. What? This is confusing.
Yeah, that's also the director's fault, because the director should be catching that and going like, whoops.
Like, let's do another take.
Yeah. Pump the brakes. Let's do that again. They should have had enough time to watch for that stuff. So, yeah, aggressive recruiting. Now, I mean, again,
not unlike the First Order's tactics.
Yeah, it does. The Argo City, you know, bothered me because it's like, really, they had spaceships. How did you know? And how did it sneak up on them? Like that irritated me, just because they wanted to like show the, you know, launching the child Jonathan out, and which raises one of the other differences in the comic. Earth 3 was a supervillain planet, and Lex Luthor was the hero on that planet, and Superman was Ultraman, and Green Lantern was Power Ring, and Batman was like the Owlman, I think. And so like they're all different spins on them, and Luthor's the one hero, and he married Lois Lane, and their child's Alexander Luthor, who's an infant, and he has a rocket pod that is able to escape dimensions that they launch Alexander out of. And Alexander is mission critical to what happens in the Crisis comic book. Mm-hmm. We don't have him here. And I was curious if they were going to try playing with Jonathan in that degree, but they're not, at least because there was rapid aging, and you know, he turned into like a 18-year-old pretty quickly. So that's not happening here. He stayed an infant. So they needed that escape, and they had spaceships, and they weren't asleep at the wheel. They would have seen an antimatter wave more than like 4 minutes beforehand. So
I mean, that was very like hippie cult like. So maybe they they had forgotten all technology there and we're just like, nope. Whatever happens, happens.
we just chill here. It's like,
Yeah.
really? Really? On your little planetoid of grooviness?
I was like, okay, Kryptonians, like, way to go from super high tech society to like, let's live like hippies.
It's like, and you survived the planet blowing up because of science, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But like,
that,
let's turn to a non-scientific lifestyle.
yeah, and it's like, and you think you would be a little ramped up after that because you're going to pay attention to things. It's like you're keeping an eye on the environment because you're on a chunk of a planet that's a functional city state floating through space. So maybe you'd want to make sure it stays safe. But I again, that was something that bothered me. But but it made sense that you can't bump off Superman, who's also going to get a spin-off series.
Yeah.
So then we get Pariah, and I have mixed feelings on this version of Pariah. The comic version, he was a tad whiny, but he also had severe PTSD because for God knows how long he had been watching Earth upon Earth get destroyed. So, his sanity is like compromised because he's just seen nothing but death for, potentially years. And it's taken a toll on him of just getting pulled through, multiverse to multiverse to watch people die. And that's eating him alive. This version, he's more together. He's still super guilty about like, hey, I accidentally woke up the anti-monitor, my bad. But the whininess is not there, so that is refreshing. But we do have the issue with Black Lightning because, again, this is also one of the differences. Earth One ends up being the last Earth standing while they're debating about how to deal with the anti-monitor's cannon, and like the 5 other Earths get wiped out while they're debating.
Yeah.
Like, quit talking.
Yeah. It's like time is of the essence, but it's not of the essence, but it is, but it's not.
It's like 5 universes died while you were talking about your feelings. Dude, suck it up. Talk about, I mean, granted, good thing there are no survivors to sue you. Like, live with that, Barry. Digress. But Jefferson shows, was saved by Pariah.
Aggressively saved.
Yeah, aggressively saved, and family dies, and he's understandably upset, and but holds it together, and then does have. I like his exchanges with Barry Allen. I do. The actors have nice chemistry, and it just like that was good to see. But let's talk about the duty to rescue. Saving. Yeah, aggressive rescue.
The aggressive rescue. Yeah, so much like Kate Kane, I mean, we don't see the circumstances from which Jefferson is plucked, but he definitely seems to be there against his will. I mean, he seems very confused and very kind of disoriented, and so Pariah clearly just kind of yanked him, and he's like, well, let's go. You really don't have a choice in the matter. So he is unlawfully restrained and unlawfully moved to this, where the antimatter cannon is. And the other thing that Pariah is on the hook for, if Jefferson so wanted to go after him, is a failure to rescue his family, because that's Jefferson's first objection, as he says, because Pariah says his earth is destroyed, and he says, well, what about my wife, my kids, and he says they perished too, and so Pariah had a duty to rescue. He could be liable for failing to rescue them because there's, and we've talked about this before on other podcasts, there's a very narrow window where a duty to rescue arises. Obviously there's moral duty to rescue, but when a legal duty to rescue arises, is very, limited circumstances. If you have a special relationship, i.e. parent-child, spouses, etc. But here you have the situation where Pariah, arguably, and if Jefferson gets a good attorney, an attorney can demonstrate that Pariah created this hazard, right? He created the hazardous situation. Granted, he didn't set up the anti-monitor cannon, he didn't start the whole thing, but he, as you mentioned, Josh, his guilt is that he released the anti-monitor in the first place, right? That's his thing. But for Pariah, HR, or whatever his name is, releasing the anti-monitor, this would have never happened, right? So without him doing that, Jefferson's family and his earth would not have perished. So, and he created the hazard and then he failed to rescue them. So I definitely think Jefferson has a case for kind of pursuing action against Pariah once the dust is settled, because he immediately jumps into action. He doesn't sit there wasting time. He could go after him for recovery.
Yeah, I don't agree with Pariah created the situation with the anti-monitor, because the anti-monitor still is the factor in going like, hey, I'm going to declare war on all life and destroy everything. So I think that limits liability, because Pariah can't control the anti-monitor.
Mm-hmm.
But in the comic, that's part of Pariah's guilt and like his full-on PTSD, nervous breakdown, like status that he has throughout most of the series, until he finds out that the anti-monitor was using him. And so like that changed. So he went, oh, it's not all my fault. I still feel bad, but like they're not all dead because of me. Yeah. And there was another character that he saved on another Earth, and she heard that too, and she went like, oh, I shouldn't just be angry at him. So like there was a little that gets reflective as well. But I don't know if we'll see that in this, because the comic was 12 issues long, and all the crossovers that then happened in all the different books, it's like it took place over a year. This is 5 episodes. Mm-hmm. So like there's only so much that they can do in the amount of time that they have. So they got to cherry pick, the issues. But we'll see. We'll see what they do. Again, we know that these folks are really good at fan service. Let me rephrase that. Meaningful fan service, mm-hmm. Not just tossing in, hey, remember this?
Yeah.
Sparkle, remember this? Yeah, so, but now it's okay. So, well, let's talk.
Kidnapping. There's a lot of kidnapping in this episode.
Yeah, and so the other thing to get into is Flash, the original, the 1990 Flash from Earth 90. And I know the comic, as I mentioned before, kills Barry Allen. And his death in the comic is powerful because he's one of the biggest casualties. And he dies alone. And so, like, no one initially knows his sacrifice and how, he takes out the anti-monitor cannon because he's been kidnapped by the anti-monitor. And it's painful. He starts appearing throughout time. And so you have, like, Batman's fighting the Joker and Barry, appears. And he appears to other characters, like, at different points in time. And all these folks are trying to figure out, where are you? They want to go save him. And the way he basically deteriorates and dies, such a gut punch and so well done that I remember reading it as a kid and like feeling a lot. And that's a high bar to go like, okay, we're going to bring this to TV with the first actor that played the Flash, and we got to make this good. Go. And so let's talk about that with Monitor versus Anti-Monitor, and who did kidnapping. And because, I mean, the Monitor's kind of shady in this, but the Anti-Monitor's the guy actually using him as slave labor. So take it away, Gabby.
Yeah. So, he obviously, this is probably the most textbook case of kidnapping. You know, we can kind of go back and forth on how willingly the other heroes kind of go into the request of Harbinger and Pariah, but the Anti-Monitor clearly kidnaps the Flash. He forces him into forced labor, and code here, what's relevant is 18 U.S. Code 1589, which outlaws unlawful forced labor. And so it says, whoever knowingly provides or obtains the labor or services of a person by any one of the following means, including force, threats of serious harm, et cetera, et cetera. And the person, in addition to any sort of kidnapping charges the person may face, the person shall also be fined and imprisoned for up to 20 years under this particular code section. So he's definitely forcing him into a forced labor situation, because he's obtaining the labor of Earth 90 Flash to power this antimatter cannon. And, you know, unfortunately, it results in Earth 90's death. And that would, in a sense, under this code, because it says, the code goes on to say that if death results from the violation, i.e. the forced labor, the defendant can face up to life in prison. So, you know, this is truly, I think, a very textbook case of forced labor, of him kidnapping him putting him on this treadmill, for lack of a better word, and forcing him to run to operate the cannon.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. So in the comic, the cannon that he has to run around, it's circular, and that's a better visual.
Yeah. It's just very treadmill looking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's a treadmill, and so it's just like but the way they have Flash 90 die is good. I'm like, it's a nice send off for that character. You know, the way he winks, you know, at Barry on the way to go save the day. I mean, it's a good hero's death. He's not, I mean, like, well, the actual death is alone, but people know it's happening, and they know he's making the sacrifice, and it is a good rallying point. And they do show footage from the 1990 series. So, like, again, it's a nice love letter. They did the best they could with the budget that they have. The cannon looked great.
Yeah.
I would have preferred, you know, again, it's a different looking cannon in the comics. It's because they weren't confined by any budget. So it's like, George Perez, go for it, buddy. And boy, did he. But again, we do get the hero's death. And
I think it has the emotional impact too, because, you know, what's tied in this is, as you're seeing it, you know, as, I mean, he's not just Earth 90 Flash, as, you know, fans who are just new to Flash coming into the CW series, you know, this is Barry Allen's dad. This is his doppelganger, his dad's doppelganger, that, like, who, you know, his mother died and then his father is wrongfully accused. And so, you know, he's had to say goodbye to his father multiple times in multiple versions.
Like
which always leads to a Grant Gustin ugly cry, that he is definitely very good at that, about crying very emotionally on screen. But yeah, and so it's, you feel that from Barry's perspective, that he's having to say goodbye, because Earth 90 Flash was a mentor to him.
Mm-hmm.
He not just looked like his father, he was a mentor to him, and so he's having to say goodbye to his father yet again. And so I like the twist, though, that, like you said before, we've been building up to Crisis since the start of the Flash series, and Flash was supposed to disappear / die in Crisis. And the twist here is they never said which one, right? They never said, I mean, obviously, though, it's the picture of Barry Allen on the cover of the paper. So I don't know how they're going to explain that one, but maybe they're just like, oh, everybody forget about that paper that you saw for like several episodes that we kept bringing back up again. We're just going to change it around at the last second. But I thought that was a good twist as well.
But they don't have the paper from the next day. Flash returned, and everything's okay now.
Just kidding.
That was a close one, Batman. Yeah, that. Other ways that they could totally play that. So, yeah. Pivoting to the supervillain, and so we have Lex Luthor from Earth 38, who the Monitor saves from death, and I stopped watching Supergirl like mid-season last year just because I was getting a little annoyed with it, and of how it like how the basically, I think, appealing to a younger audience was just like, okay, this isn't for me. I can't take this anymore. And I like Bruce Brock's linear. I wanted to see him as the bad president, but I couldn't. So I couldn't. But we have this Lex who decides to go on a murder spree with the Book of Destiny, hopping through universes. And there's so many issues with that, of who has jurisdiction for prosecuting him for all the Men of Tomorrow he's murdered.
Yeah.
And on one level, I would just to knock it out quickly, the universe where the crime happened. I mean, like, prosecute him there, and maybe we'll prosecute him multiple times. Now that gets into the issue of, is the Book of Destiny a dangerous weapon? And clearly, a screwdriver can be a dangerous weapon. It all depends how you use the tool. If you use the screwdriver to stab someone, it's now a dangerous weapon. If you use the Book of Destiny to start bumping off Supermen left and right, it's a dangerous weapon.
Yeah. Now,
let's get into Earth 666 with again,
a literal deal with the devil.
Yeah, literal deal with the devil. And again, like, the chemistry between Constantine and Lucifer was awesome.
Yeah.
And again, it's just seeing an actor leaning in and having fun it's like, I have two women hanging on me, and now I'm gonna flirt with Oliver Queen's daughter to get her to say what she desires the most. It's like, okay, you take this creepy, sexy thing to a whole new level, but they enter a contract with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of states, not all, but a lot of states have a duty of good faith and fair dealing implied in contracts, and which means like you can't be a schmuck. And you get into the issue with the devil, that his card is fading fast, and the issue is like, does that violate the duty of good faith and fair dealing? What are your thoughts?
That's hard, because I mean, you're obviously making a deal with the devil, so you shouldn't kind of necessarily expect the same kind of contract rules and duties to apply, but at the same time, he does kind of withhold the fact. He doesn't specify. He says it's going to fade, but he doesn't explain how fast it's going to fade. And so, you know, he's does kind of hold back that element of it, of the contract. But you know, I think, to me, that's kind of made moot by the fact that they do find Oliver in a timely fashion. You know, obviously they have to kind of like wrestle him back to his wits, if you will. But they do find him in a timely fashion. So I tend to think, if, you know, if Spectre hadn't shown up, that, you know, the point would have made moot, because he was going to go with them in a timely fashion before the card expired, before Spectre showed up. So, and obviously the devil could not have foreseen Spectre showing up, or maybe he could have, but, you know, he couldn't have anticipated that, theoretically. So the performance of the contract happened in a timely fashion, albeit quickly, but, you know, they weren't kind of made unequal, or kind of impaired by that withholding of fact.
Indeed, indeed. Well, now we have the issue with partnership. So the Monitor, you know, puts together the A team to go save the day, and there's a lot there with, you know, getting a one of the Legends, you know, ships, and, you know, the team together. They're not operating on the Monitor satellite, which was huge in the comics. Again, that would be another set. So they're using the tools that they have with just using, let's just use the Wave Rider and everything's okay. So we don't need something else. But does he actually form a valid partnership agreement, you know, with the heroes? And I would say yes. I mean, like, they're all in common cause to go save the multiverse. So yeah, there's a partnership agreement there, you know, common law version of it, you know, which then raises the issue of, like, you have to act in good faith to your partners because you have a fiduciary duty, and you have him withholding material facts, like saying what Lex Luthor is going to go do, or, you know, like, hey, go see the twisted mean Bruce Wayne, who's not the cuddly nice Uncle Bruce, but, you know, the schmuck. And, you know, like, I would say that while the Monitor has a plan, the comic book Monitor was much better at treating people. Sure, there were some folks, it's like, oh, Blue Beetle's not needed anymore, he can be sent back, you know, and Ted's wondering, like, what just happened? Why am I back home? Versus the way he, you know, like, lets Lex Luthor run around killing Superman across the multiverse, or any of the other actions that are taking place with, you know, feeding Kate and Kara to evil Bruce to go have something emotionally traumatic. It's like, hey, you know, your cousin that you love, who's a really good guy, and you know, you love seeing him. This version of him is a schmuck.
Well,
And
I think that, to me, is a better example of some sort of violation of good faith and fair dealings, than the deal with the devil, because, you know, he says, oh, the paragon of, what is it, courage, you know, is, you know, whatever his riddle is. And it's not until they come back and he's like, oh yeah, that was a test to make Kate the paragon of courage. Like, so he withheld, you know, he knew that by saying what he said, that they were going to assume that it was, you know, that it was Bruce, that was the paragon, and that's what they needed to go get him and to convince him. And so I think he was definitely not acting in good faith, when he gave them that riddle, because it was obvious what the other parties, understanding of the task was, and he manipulated that to his advantage to, make Kate the paragon of courage, or whatever she is. So.
I don't think she needed to jump through those hoops. I think she knew it all along of, like, I'm not afraid to stand up to people. Why were you a schmuck in this situation? Because now I don't trust you.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be trusting because we are supposed to save the multiverse. Which is why, like, I really didn't like the Lex Luthor arc of him running around bumping off Superman. It's like, this serves no purpose. This is just to give that actor something to do.
I'm sorry, I don't like John Cryer as Lex Luthor. I think it's terrible.
I didn't have a problem with the actor as Lex. I just had a problem with that as a story element. It's like, this is dumb. I was not on board, nor what happens at the end, because a couple things can happen, but still, I didn't like Lex trying to, block the Superman that we actually want to see. So, like, that's the issue, which then raises the issue, and I think we can knock this out quickly, of did the Monitor cause intentional infliction of emotional distress, sending Supergirl and Batwoman to Earth 99 to Kate had to fight him like one-on-one, not cool, and Kara going through his trophies and going like, so you killed Clark here? Like, here are his bloody glasses. Screw you, old man. Like, we're out of here.
Yeah.
Intentional infliction of emotional distress. And, like, he not negligent because he knowingly did it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think what was tough for Kara was not just that, she saw that Clark had been murdered, but in her Earth, Bruce Wayne and Clark are allies, they're friends. So to that kind of betrayal was definitely, his conduct was extreme and outrageous, and they suffered severe emotional distress. I don't care if you want to call becoming a paragon extreme emotional distress, becoming a paragon. If that's what the kids are calling it these days, so be it. It's emotional distress.
Yeah. Here's your trial by fire, and good luck, kiddo.
Have fun.
Fire hot, girl learn. It's just like, thanks, Dad. Not cool. So we then get into a duty to warn situation. Is there a duty to warn other Earths of the impending crisis? And like, well, is there a relationship there, connecting them to the other Earths? And like, can you do anything? like that's the issue.
Yeah.
Can you do anything? In the comic, when, like, this gets super complicated, there is a Alexander Luthor and Lila and Pariah appear at a United Nations, so it's then simulcast at the other UNs, like trying to get everyone on board to say, like, this is what we got to do to save our worlds. They really, I don't know if they have the ability to communicate to that level, and if it's only going to like freak people out as well. So so yes, I don't think they have a duty, because I don't think the relationship's there, and I don't think it would make the situation better because it's like,
and they may have a moral duty to warn, but a legal duty, the bystander rule or quote unquote good Samaritan laws are intricately tied with the duty to rescue. And because that legal duty to rescue is so narrow, I don't think either the Monitor or Pariah really has sort of any obligation outside of, kind of a moral, like, is it the right thing to do? Yeah, but like, do they have to? Not really. So I think, no, they don't have any sort of legal duty to warn anybody. And neither, to that matter, does Supergirl or any of the Earth 38 heroes to rescue the Earth 38 population. There's no duty to rescue them as well. What they're doing there is being heroes and rescuing them, not because they have to, but because they want to, and because they are pillars of good, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's also bad form just to leave people to die, but that's that's also that's what makes them heroes. Let's get into the issue of like you're drafting people to become paragons.
Yeah.
It's like, is that a unilateral contract? And like, because they do have to convince the guy who will eventually become the Atom. It's like, dude, you represent humanity.
Yeah.
And like his reaction is like, I want to go home and die with my wife. It's like they didn't sell that right. Instead of saying, hey, it's the end of the world and we need you, because his reaction is like, no, I want to go home.
Yeah.
Because if we're all going to die, I want to go home. If you're selling it, everyone's going to die unless you help us because we need you to save the day. That's a better sales pitch.
Yeah.
And like, they don't do that.
Yeah, they went about that pretty wrong. And I think what I found interesting was, we talked earlier about the heroes being kidnapped or aggressively recruited, whereas there's a debate as to whether there's free will involved, and how much free choice do they have in kind of Harbinger / Pariah's kind of request, whereas it seems like this call to be a paragon is an offer that they have to accept willingly, right? Because they could have totally I don't know what Ryan Choi's character was, but what his name was, but they could have easily like clunked him over the head, tossed him in wherever their vehicle, and taken him with them, right? That would have been the easy solution to him saying, no, I don't want to do this. But they make it a point of Iris convincing him that this is what he has to do. And so it really seems like, and you see Kate struggle with her call to be a paragon and to finally accept that and what that means. And so I think, this is more like a contract. It's an offer that they have to come to of sound mind and body and free will, of their own free will, accept that offer. So it's much more a contract as opposed to the kind of kidnapping / aggressive recruiting of Harbinger and Pariah.
And I think the paragons do accept their role because everything's on the line.
Yeah.
And when they show up to Earth 96, Superman naturally is like, yes,
but of course,
because again, Superman's relevant today, and so like, you need help, I'm there. It's like that's what we want in the hero, and being able to go, hey, we need your help. It's like Kate isn't overly conflicted. It's like, okay, I didn't realize this about me, but it's that part of its hero's journey, but it's a little different because when you find out, we're all counting on you, and it asks the person to step up, it's different. It's not like finding Excalibur, type of situation, going like, hey, look, I'm the King of England now. I have the magic sword. It's, we need you because you're special. And people rightfully freak out with like, oh, I have, okay. And like they could say no, they could run away screaming, but that's not, part of a hero is overcoming fear. And just classic political theory is a heroic act is doing something that can kill you. And again, that's Aristotle, Plato type view of being a hero, of like, you could die and you're still doing it because it's the right thing to go do. And again, it's that facing fear, and all the paragons are doing that. Let's get into the issue of defending Harbinger for the murder of the Monitor. And the two versions of this, comic versus TV show, are actually similar. In the comic, the Harbinger starts like curing the anti-monitors, like getting influenced by him. There's in the comic, she can duplicate herself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how she goes to multiple Earths at once to go recruit people and all different timelines. So she's like everywhere at once for getting, the first dozen whatever people who are going to go save the day in issue 1. Well, in one of those places, one of the shadow demons like merges into that version of Harbinger, and then when they all are reunified, that's how the anti-monitor gets in. And like she's aware of it and she's fighting it, but it's kind of like this irresistible impulse that's happening with her. While in the TV show, it looks more like full-on possession. So the insanity defense would work for like both versions of the character, mm-hmm. but they are different versions of the insanity test that could be argued to defend her. We'll see if they do this, in the TV show, but in the comic, the Monitor knew she was being manipulated, and his tuning forks and all the other Earths needed to be powered in order to save the other Earths. So when she kills him, that releases all of his energy to power the different tuning forks to save Earths 1 and 2, and then Harbinger herself is the one who pulls in the other 3, and in helping save them. We don't know if they're going to do something like that with this series. I would hope so. Now, we did see when the Monitor is killed, Harbinger does get his energy, like it flows into her. I don't know if that means it's thus flowed into the anti-monitor. We also know that this version of Earth 1 in the TV show doesn't have a tuning fork on it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where they're going to go, but if they follow the comic, like those 2 Earths get pulled into this other realm and they're safe, at least temporarily. And which is why I think Earth 1 might still exist. It's pulled out of time. And the issue with the other like 6 Earths that get wiped out, it's like, okay, I don't know about them. They all could be dead, which again is a difference between the 2. So again, I don't know where they're going to go with it. Again, this also happens to be the challenge with like having read the comics when I was a kid, and I got them on Comixology again because for some reason my collection isn't complete. I might have borrowed the others from a buddy in order to like read them all when I was in 1985. But it's definitely interesting things. The comic has a fight at the dawn of time, and the Spectre plays a key role in fighting the anti-monitor at the dawn of time. And the way that it looks in the comic is super cool. Like everything's white, and the mystical characters are playing a role, and there's a lot happening. It would be impossible to do that on a TV show budget. So we know that there's going to be some lens filters that for their dawn of time fight. So we'll see what they do, and if they have Earths merge after that. So
I mean, I think my thinking is that so the 2 shows we have left are Arrow and Legends, which Legends is going to be a special episode because it's not returning until March. And I think this has really been kind of, it's been a year in the making, or you can say it's been longer if you kind of count the Flash, but this is Arrow's last season, and I think they may have 1 or 2 episodes after this to cap off the series. So I really think making Oliver Spectre, they're going to, I think, really hone in on a lot of those Arrow sets, and maybe do an Arrow beginning of time, as opposed to kind of, we've seen obviously Lian Yu be used over and over and over and over and over and over again. But I think they're really going to do it as to me, it was very impactful, that when Spectre comes up to Oliver and he says, I was a decorated police officer, blah, 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 but I became something else. And, I've watched Arrow since the premiere episode. I've been in and out of it, but I've watched it from the beginning, and that's been the consistent thing, is I had to become someone else. I had to become something else. And so I really think this whole crisis has led to, is going to be more of a Oliver Queen send off. And I think they're really going to lean into using the Arrow sets, and they may be, pulling the kind of thematic threads from the comic and kind of applying that to a closed story for Oliver Queen, and really applying that, because it seems that that's been the theme throughout the kind of crisis, his death, his resurrection, that's kind of the background kind of movement, if you will, and the thing that's been powering this. So I'd be interested to see how they do it, especially given that they seem to have so much respect for the show. Not just respect of where they came from, as far as, we saw Smallville, we saw, kind of all these types of things. But I think one thing the Arrow, and especially in their crossover episodes, is very good at doing. I mean, you have 5 spin-off series now. You have Flash, Legends, Black Lightning, which is not technically a spin-off, Batwoman, you're getting the Superman spin-off, you have Supergirl, and so I think, but it all started with Arrow, and so that was, I want to say Arrow premiered in 2008, 2010. That seems.
Is this what, season 6 or 7 for them?
Season 8, yeah.
Season 8, okay.
So I think they may have started in 2011 or 2012. Can't remember if I was in high school or I just started college. But regardless, so I think they have a lot of respect for the impact that Arrow has had on this whole universe that they've built. I mean, it's called the Arrowverse for a reason. So I think they're, we've seen how considerate and how kind of deferential they are to where they came from as far as the prior histories. I think they're going to be even more deferential to this kind of send-off of Arrow. And I mean, we can debate all day long of how they've really made Oliver Queen more of a Batman character as opposed to Oliver Queen / the Green Arrow. But I think they know the kind of impact this has had, and I think that's where they're going with it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. My view is Arrow's earned it. We wouldn't be here without them, without the reverence that the writers and the creative team, the actors have had for the characters and bringing it to life. That it does deserve kind of the hero send-off. Having Oliver become the Spectre, that wasn't in the comic. And the Spectre does play a big role at the dawn of time and slugging it out with the Anti-Monitor to stop him from, corrupting all of existence, so the positive matter universe never even existed. So, if they're going for that, that is a big thing. The other way that they could end this is the Superman of Earth 2, which technically was the first hero, even though, so all the Earth 2 heroes were first, but they're Earth 2. And that is so weird and always kind of bugged me from just a naming convention. like he is the classic Superman from 1938. Oh my, why am I blanking on that? 38 or 39. So like that is critically important. And the final battle is Superman of Earth 2, who looks like he's in his like late 50s, early 60s, in a death match with the Anti-Monitor. And in the comic, it is brilliant. It's exceptional. And it's like Superman of Earth 2 going like, okay, it's on me. I'm saving the day. And it's, this giant slugfest, and it is beautiful. And there are other characters in play as well. And it has a beautiful ending with how they end that. The way that the TV show is structured, I don't know how much of that they could do, but I would love to see Superman of Earth 96 beat the crap out of the Monitor, because it's just, he's supposed to represent, the 1978 Superman, like our first superhero on the big screens. Like, I want to see that. And with the way they do fan service, that would be meaningful fan service to see that. The comic, now this is weird. In the comic, as I mentioned, Flash dies. Beautiful hero send off. Supergirl died as well, and she went toe to toe with the Anti-Monitor and nearly killed him. And she did that in order to save Superman, and ended up dying in the process. And it was, again, great slugfest, excellent battle. So they're not doing that with their two capital characters that they have in the Arrowverse now, because they're not going to do that.
And we've kind of already gotten that iconic imagery of Superman lifting Kara's kind of broken body. I can't remember what particular episode it was of Supergirl that they kind of recreated that. So I think we've gotten that, and I don't think they're gonna put off their two biggest cash cows right now.
Nope. There's a reason why Daddy Flash went out, and they're just going to ignore that. And this also, with the lineup that they have for the Paragons, Martian Manhunter and Supergirl would be the strongest. Like, Manhunter's like as strong as Superman, and they really haven't played that up in the TV show, but he is also super strong. And so they do have a good team, but it's different. And let's just see where they go, because they, like, if they follow the comics, they would probably need another episode to do it all. So I'm not sure what they're going to do, but we're going to find out very shortly.
Yeah, I'm calling it now. I think that the final battle is going to be on the Queen's Gambit, with Arrow taking down the Anti-Monitor, and possibly also, I mean, one of the other Paragons is Sarah Lance, who also kind of, her journey started there too. So I think that would be great, like internal fan service, to have it kind of be back on there. That kind of reminds us that there was something that happened before this island that we keep coming back to.
So an homage that they could do. So in the comics, it was hinted that Barry turned into the bolt of lightning that hit him in the past in order to give him his superpowers. So a spin on that would be Spectre versus Anti-Monitor, and that sinks the Queen's Gambit, landing Oliver on the island to begin with. So so again, they totally plausible, and thematically works. We'll see. I wish they had more money, but this would be a bigger budget than Infinity War to do it right. And what they're doing is a beautiful love letter. So we'll see how they finish it. And depending on what they do, raises interesting questions on if there's one Earth or if there is a multiverse after this. Because stay tuned. We can talk about that because there's the comic raised some big issues with that. So stay tuned, everybody. So, Gabby, thank you for nerding out over the Arrowverse crisis. And for everyone, stay geeky. Stay geeky, America.